Hello everyone, I'm back with part 2 of PS Vita exclusives. Now, after I finished part 1, I thought there won't be an awful lot left, probably just some minor games, and I thought it wouldn't be a big job. Well, I had a bit of a surprise. There turned out to be more than I had expected. Admittedly, some of them are pretty forgettable, very minor titles, but I think you will find there might be one or two surprises in this lot. So fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be quite a long ride. PS Vita exclusives. Let's dive in. So the first game is a brain game. Smart As. You've probably seen it about. It often ended up in the bargain bins in games shops, and you could pick it up for like $5 usually. That's what I did. If you look at the cover design, I think you'll agree it doesn't look awfully inviting. Well, I don't think so. It looks like someone who's just starting out in a design program took a few of the ready-made elements available and stuck them together. If I looked at that in a shop and didn't know what it was, I'd probably just walk past. On the back is a bit of a description, what the game is about, of course. But to me, what they crucially never mention anywhere is the big draw card, John Cleese. He does the voice-over narration, and it is, of course, pretty funny, so why not mention it? I don't know. So this game is obviously a kind of puzzle game. It was developed by Climax Studios and published by the ex-Dev Studio Europe department for Sony. Now, that ex-Dev Studio, they did a lot of excellent work in the early days of the Vita. The game was released in North America and Europe and Australia in October 2012. So quite early on, that was the first year of the Vita in the West. And as I mentioned, John Cleese appears as the voice of the narrator. It is designed, like most other brain training games, to be played once a day in order to achieve brain power score. You probably know these brain games they've had for years for yonks on the Nintendo DS and 3DS. I can't remember, they're called Dr. Kawashina's Brain Training or something like that, and I believe they were quite popular. There are brain games in 4 areas: arithmetic, logic, observation and language, 5 games in each area, so a total of 20. The game uses the different input mechanisms of the Vita. Like most of the early games, Sony obviously encouraged developers to use all the new fancy features, touchscreen, rear touchpad, and some of the networking facilities. The Vita, of course, incorporates a GPS system, so that was used in some games. Like in this one, the so-called Street Smart mode uses the Vita's GPS location-based features. Now, some of those features nowadays, if you're playing the game with Sony having disabled a lot of those features, like the near function, that's long gone, some of those won't work anymore. But overall, I think this is actually not a bad brain game. If you want to work a bit on your little grey cells, this is probably not a bad way to go. I mean, just disregard the cover, you know. I remember when I got it, I put it on late one night just as I was going to bed, and I thought, oh, I'll just have a look at this. Well, that was not a good idea because the game is quite full on, even in the tutorial stage, and I ended up with a miserable score because I was nearly falling asleep there. So make sure you're wide awake and have had your cup of coffee or tea when you attempt this smart as brain game. It is a Vita exclusive. I'm not aware it's ever come to any other platform. If you see it somewhere for a few bucks, you might just want to pick it up. And just to hear John Cleese's voice, that's a bonus. So the next one is a kid's favourite. A Looney Tunes game. Yep, the whole crew is there. It's called Galactic Sports. As you can see, it's a very colourful game, cartoony game, obviously. So this is the back of the case. And I'll just show you the bubble on the screen. So you can see from that already the bubble is really, with Bugs Bunny there, cheerful. I don't know Looney Tunes, it wasn't available when I was a kid, so I'm not sure, is that Daffy Duck or somebody on the other side? Anyway, that's the game. A 2015 sports game developed by Sony themselves, digitally downloaded, an Australian online magazine. Actually reviewed the game and says it isn't bad, it does what it sets out to achieve. The problem is that it lacks any ambition to do anything more than a cash-in, and this game really isn't going to be remembered as the finest project Sony backed on its PlayStation Vita platform. No, I don't think anybody was expecting that either, but from the little bit I've played, it uses the touch screen an awful lot. So it's like a lot of those mobile games where you tap and swipe and, for jumping and running and all that. I would think for kids in particular it'll be enjoyable. But nowadays, most people probably say, well, that's something I'll play on my phone, and kids would probably think so too, maybe on a tablet. I'm wondering, with hindsight, whether Sony backed the right horse, so to speak, by going for all these touch controls. Nowadays it's seen more as a fad for serious gamers. There are very few games where it really works well. It's a shame really, because it was always going to be the slightly inferior option compared with the ease of a mobile game that you've got ready on your phone and you just tap and swipe away. Yeah. Okay, so that was our second exclusive. Now another cartoony, licensed, funny game, again for the younger age group, is Phineas and Ferb. Put a stop to crazy Dr. Doof. It's called Day of Doofenshmirtz. Now, I haven't played it. I don't know the cartoon it's based on. Let's have a look what my notes say. Oh, this is interesting. This is notably the first and only video game based on the series to be released after the show ended. It's apparently a platformer and came out in November 2015. It's got a Metacritic score of 60. So I can't say much more about it, except I think I saw reviews out when it was released, and people said they enjoyed playing it. It's as a little something relaxing to play in between bigger games. Yeah, it's an exclusive. Now we'll come to one of the big franchises on the Vita, and that is the Hyperdimension Neptunia series. This is a minor spin-off game, and to this day, as far as I know, it has remained exclusive to the Vita. And that is Hyperdimension Neptunia producing Perfection. This is, as far as I'm aware, an idle management game. I haven't played it myself yet, but please note I have these rather cute little buttons that came with the game. So this is described as a life simulation and rhythm video game, obviously developed by Compile Hard and Tamsoft and published by Idea Factory, exclusively for the Vita. The game was released in Japan in 2013 and in the West in 2014. I haven't heard anything particularly bad about it. I seem to remember some people saying they thought it would be a really very lightweight, slightly empty kind of game, and they were surprised. It was actually, in terms of the idle management, quite deep and enjoyable. Nobody's claiming greatness for the game, but it's apparently a perfectly okay game, and it's an exclusive. I will mention a few games which I think are really important in terms of being PS Vita exclusives, but for whatever reason I don't happen to own a physical copy. So all I can do is put up an image of the cover art so you can easily identify it. So this game I want to talk about now, called AW Phoenix Festa, I do not have a physical copy for. However, I do have it digitally, so I will show you a little clip from the game in a moment. In the meantime, I'll just put up the cover image art. The game is available in a Japanese version, but what's really of interest to us in the West is that there is or rather was, an Asian English version published, but it is quite rare these days and commands top prices on eBay, so very difficult to come by. I'm still hunting. After years of trying, I still haven't managed to acquire a copy. Maybe I will one day. In the meantime, I'm happy to have it digitally. I just checked and I purchased it in 2017 for 25 New Zealand dollars. So that would have been just under 20 US dollars back then. The game was delisted from the PlayStation Vita in December of 2018, so it's not available any longer. If you didn't purchase before then, there's no way you can get hold of it on PlayStation Network. It's based on the anime of the Japanese light novel series The Asterisk War, The Academy City. So the Asterisk War, that accounts for the AW in the title. The game was most likely delisted due to expired licensing. PlayStation Lifestyle had quite a reasonable review of the game, so I'll just read you out the significant part here. Vita's already seen a number of dating sims, but none of them combine action RPG gameplay with visual novel elements like AW Phoenix Festa. Because it handles both of these decently, it's worth checking out for fans of the Asterisk War franchise and anyone who thinks they might enjoy such a combination. Unfortunately, it's way too light on narrative to leave much of an impact. So I have actually watched the anime, The Asterisk War, and I quite enjoyed it. It's pretty lightweight, but I somehow got into it. I got into the characters and what was going on, and it was a very pleasant diversion. So I was happy to pick up the game, and the combat is from memory a bit button mashy, and the story, like the review said, there's not an awful lot there that's different from the anime. But overall, as a lightweight, enjoyable bit of gameplay in between, it's not a bad game. It's somewhere in the middle there, bit undistinguished, but nice to have if you enjoy that sort of thing. I unfortunately don't have the game installed on any of my Vitas at the moment, so I'm downloading it on my PlayStation TV, which means I can capture just a little bit of the beginning for you. You can choose either a pre-made character, Ayato Amagiri, or construct your own, but it's easier starting with the pre-made character from the anime. And the objective for the game was stated, it's pretty straightforward. Find a partner and win the Festa. You see some typical anime story tropes here, familiar from many other anime series. So this is the first tutorial battle. Obviously pretty straightforward, but it'll still give you an impression. The only issue I really had with the combat was the camera, which wasn't very good. You notice that in later battles when you fight with a companion and there are 4 players on the screen and following around and swiveling around and tracking and locking on becomes a bit awkward. That was the only downside I remember. You can see that both the tutorial and menu design is not overwhelming. It's pretty basic. It does the job, but it doesn't look fantastic. Now here's another game in the anime style, a Japanese game obviously. It's called Drive Girls and it is a Vita exclusive. It has not been reviewed terribly well, but I booted it up only the other day and had a quick look, and it's okay for what it is. As I mentioned, it's not been treated well by the reviewing press. It has a meta score of 39, so that's pretty low, but users rated it 55, so they were obviously more forgiving and enjoyed it a bit more than the critics. I can't say much about it because I've just started it up and played just a little bit. So you see already quite a straightforward, fairly clean graphic style. Nothing outstanding, but not bad. The game was developed by Tamsoft, and this is the title screen. It's basically a mission-based game where girls have to fight monsters, and their special combat skill is that they can transform into cars and basically run down monsters that way. And obviously you need to develop your special skills as you go along. So this is a mission selection stage. If you want something silly to while away 5 or 10 minutes on the bus and just, you know, causing carnage, then there's nothing wrong with it, I think. So she's going on to a mission here. She passed her exam in the previous mission. And you can see there's a little bit of fan service type costume there. I haven't come across anything particularly outrageous. Now the dialogue, there's quite a lot of inconsequential chatter, not very deep, you can skip through most of that. But the action is mildly entertaining. I just played another mission and yep, for just 10 minutes in between bashing monsters and careening about in a car that's basically a girl transformed into a car. Some people called it sort of like Transformers. Yeah, it's just a bit of harmless fun, really. So that was Drive Girls, a PS Vita exclusive, which I would describe as not very distinguished but harmless fun. Now I have 2 racing car games for you. I know these tend to be very popular. I don't really play them myself, so I can't say much about them. They are, both of them, exclusive to the Vita. So this is Asphalt Injection. It was developed by Gameloft and released in 2011 in Japan, so right at the beginning of the Vita, and in early 2012 in the West. It has a meta score of 49, users rated at 50. I can't really say much about it. There was another title apparently called Asphalt 3D, published by Konami in Japan, and that was ported to the 3DS, I believe. But Asphalt Injection is definitely a Vita exclusive. Now we come to one of the great famous racing games on the Vita. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that this is a bad game or even a mediocre game. This is considered to be one of the finest, if not the finest, on the Vita. The birth of anti-gravity racing. So Wipeout 2048 was developed by SCE Studio Liverpool and published by Sony Computer Entertainment. This game, which was a launch title for the Vita, was released in January 2012 in Japan and February in Europe and North America. It is the 9th installment of the Wipeout series and the last game to be developed by Studio Liverpool before its closure in August 2012. So you'd have to say it's also a bit of Vita history. The game was designed as a test bed for the PlayStation Vita. During development, Studio Liverpool staff sent feedback about aspects of the game that could affect the design of the new console to Sony. Ideas for improvements to the device, including the addition of a rear touchscreen and 2 separate joysticks, which were not part of Sony's original design, were eventually added to the Vita. The game has a Metascore of 79 and a Meta user rating of 82. This is definitely PlayStation Vita history. This game, the development of this game, influenced the design features of the Vita itself. For any fan of racing games, Wipeout would be a must-have in your Vita collection. And for anyone who cares about the history of the Vita, as I do, even though I don't really play racing games, it was an obvious must-have for my collection. There is another racing game called Ridge Racer that was released for the Vita as a launch title in December 2011 in Japan and February 2012 in Europe, Australia and in North America in March. It is the 5th handheld game in the Ridge Racer series. The game was panned by most video game critics, some of whom has listed it as one of the worst video games ever made. It has a Metascore of 44 and a user score of 39. Obviously, I can't comment on this. I think there are a few people out there who like the game, are even fans. So, once again, it's obviously very much a question of personal preference and what you look for and like in a racing game. But it is a Vita exclusive. It was originally supposed to be titled Ridge Racer Vita, but they then dropped the Vita, so it's just Ridge Racer. Okay, on to something really jolly, colourful, lovable. Who doesn't love pets? PlayStation Vita Pets. Oh, it's one of those pet simulation games, you say. Yes, it is. It contains puzzles and is also an adventure game. It was developed by Spiral House in conjunction with XDev, whom I mentioned before, a brilliant outfit who did a lot for the Vita in the early days. The player raises a virtual dog while also adventuring with him in a fictional realm, and I think that adds a real dimension to the game. It's really very, very cute and really nicely done. The game received mixed reviews from critics and currently has a 63% rating on Metacritic. It came out in 2014. And I have played it a bit, and while some of the controls are not perfect, and it does rely a bit too much on touch controls, it actually is a nice pet game to have. Let me see if I can find it on my Vita. It's quite anthropomorphic in that the dogs are all voiced with human voices.
Outside.
So that's PlayStation Vita Pets. You can adopt a dog of your particular breed preference and then train the dog up so he learns new skills, and then you can adventure out and discover a whole fantasy world out there. As you can see, the dog simulation, the movements, the barking, etc. are quite well done. I think it's pretty likeable all round. Obviously great fun for kids. The only reservation I have is about the limited touch screen functionality, where you have to just tap on certain things to get the dog to do something, and it's sometimes a bit hit and miss trying to work out what a particular trigger will do or achieve. That's really the only downside. Otherwise I thought it was not a bad entry in the pet simulation genre. A true Vita exclusive. If you have kids, very well suited. Otherwise, definitely deserving of a place in your collection.